Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. In this lecture we're going to install and set up Visual Studio, which is where we're going to be writing our code. Okay, so let's see where we're going to write our code. You can use whatever IDE you want. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Some common examples for C# are Visual Studio Code, JetBrains Writer, or normal Visual Studio. You can follow this course using whatever IDE you want, but if you're a beginner then it's probably best to use the exact same as me. Here I will be using Visual Studio 22, the community version. This one is free. Also an important distinction, it is Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. It's a bit confusing how the names are very similar, but those are two completely different programs. Here I will be using the regular Visual Studio, so let's download it. Go to visualstudio.microsoft.com, then click on Downloads and download the free community version. Then go ahead and open up the executable file. After installing, right away it opens up the Visual Studio installer. This is the main program that manages all of your installed versions of Visual Studio. And right away we can install Visual Studio Community alongside a bunch of modules. Like I mentioned in the previous lecture, C# can be used for a lot of stuff, and in Visual Studio you can also develop on other languages, so here you can see tons and tons of modules. The ones that we're going to need in this course are the .NET Desktop Development. This will let us make console apps, which is the main template that we're going to use to learn C#, so make sure to include that one. And then since the interactive exercises, since those are built in Unity, also make sure to include game development with Unity. Okay, so these are the two main ones that we need, so let's go ahead and install. This will download all of the modules and install them. Okay, it's done and launches Visual Studio right away. Now it's asking for a sign-in. This can be useful to transfer your settings across devices. So if you want, go ahead and sign in or just click on skip for now. Then for the theme, again, you can choose whatever you want. Personally, I'm going to go with the light theme, which is what I like, but you can use whatever you prefer. And right away, let me answer the question that I inevitably get every time I say that I prefer the light theme when so many people seem to prefer dark theme. For me, my eyes simply get really messed up in dark mode. If I try focusing on white letters on a black background, I get a massive headache really quickly. So personally for me, I use light mode, but this is really just a visual change, so choose whatever you prefer. Okay, with that, let's start using Visual Studio. And yep, right away we can see the project list, although it's empty right now. We can open a project or create a brand new one, so let's do that. Then here we can choose the templates. Let's go ahead and make a simple console app, which is the most basic thing possible. So you can search for a console up here. And now, yep, it is this one right here, the one that has the C# icon in the corner. It is not this one with VB, that's for Visual Basic, and also not this one for F#, this is for F#, and it is also not this one that says C#, but also says .NET Framework. It's a bit confusing, but .NET and .NET Framework, those are two completely different things. Right now in here we want .NET and not .NET Framework. So yep, it's this template. Also, if you don't see it, then go back into the Visual Studio installer, click on Modify and install some modules, and then make sure .NET Development is checked. Okay, so this is the template that we want, the console application, so let's use this one. Okay, now let's give it a name. You can name it whatever you want. Here I'm going to go with the basic hello world, then go ahead, pick a location to spawn your project, and leave the solution the same name as the default. Okay, so like this, let's go on next. Then over here we can choose the framework. So for this, let's go with .NET 8. And now there's a pretty important option here, which is whether or not to use top level statements. Basically, if you leave this unticked, so like this, then the project won't be created and look pretty much empty. Whereas if you tick this, then the project will be created and look like this with a namespace program and a main function. The option for this difference, this was added relatively recently, so if you watch older C# tutorials, they might show this template. But for complete beginners, this completely empty option is actually easier to follow, so we're going to use this one. Later on, after we learn the absolute basics, we will make another project with the more complex template. But really the main takeaway that I want you to learn from here is really just code is code, meaning that for everything we're going to learn in the absolute basics part using this simpler template, all of that can also be done in this more complex template. The difference is simply in how in the basic template you just write code here, but in the more complex template you need to write that same code inside the main function. If you write code in a different place you can get some strange errors, so that is why for beginners the simpler template is much easier. So over here, to keep things simple, let's first use that basic template, so make sure to leave this one unticked, so example like this, and let's create. Alright, yep, so here is our empty template. And by default it already has the standard hello world print. You don't need to understand this line of code just yet, I will explain all of this in detail soon. Right now we can just run this test. So on the top right on the middle you can see this nice little play button, or alternatively the default shortcut is F5, so go ahead and press either one of those. And yep, here is the window. Our program ran, it did indeed say hello world, and everything finished. Alright, awesome. Okay, so we can already start writing some C# code and run it. Now let's change some things in Visual Studio. There's a really nice extension that I really like, which adds a bit more colors to the code, which I find that it makes it much easier to read and write. So up here on top, let's go into extensions and then manage extensions. Then then go ahead and find Viasfora. You can go to the online tab and search for it. Now, I believe that this one is actually only available on Windows, so if you're on Mac, you might not be able to find it. Maybe there is an alternative, but I'm not sure. Either way, this is just an optional extension, just to add some visuals, so technically you don't absolutely need it. But if you are on Windows, then I highly encourage you to install it. Let's go ahead, close Visual Studio to let it install. Okay, great, so done. Let's open up the same project again. Alright, so now for some more settings. You can go into Tools and Options, and over here let's scroll down to find Viasfora, and here are the settings. Now for the most part, I believe the ones that I have here are the defaults. You can pause the video and compare my settings with your own. I believe I really only changed some colors over here on the rainbow braces. Right away, if we look at our default Hello World code, it should already have some colors that make it a bit easier to read. Again, this is not a requirement. You don't need this extension, but I do find it quite useful. I find it helps to make the code more readable than having almost everything as gray. Next, for some text formatting rules, let's go up here into Tools and then go into Options. Then over here, let's scroll down and find the text editor. And again, pause the video if you want. I think over here, I have everything as defaults. Then let's expand upon this one and look specifically at the C# options. And over here, again, pretty much the same defaults. I think the only thing different is over here, I disabled the automatic brace completion just because personally I don't like it. And let's expand upon it, see a few more things. So the scroll bars, then over here the tabs, pretty normal. Then on advanced, again, I think all of this is pretty much the defaults. On IntelliSense, right like this. And then inside the code style. On general, I think over here I didn't touch any of this, so I think the only thing I touched was over here on formatting, and the main thing that I changed was over here on the new lines. Basically, the default is to have all of the curly braces, all of them on a new line, and over here I switched this ones in order to make them spawn on the same line, which personally I prefer. But again, this is very much personal preference. The code really doesn't care whether the braces are in the same line or new line, so you can use whatever format you prefer. Personally, I prefer it like this. I've been using this code style for 25 years now, so this is what I will be using in the course, but it's just a visual thing, so if you really prefer it on new line, then go ahead and place it on new line. Okay, so after all of that, Visual Studio is set up and ready to go. Now let's continue on to the next lecture, where we're going to install Unity and learn the absolute basics.